What's up everybody? My name is Carl, and happy Halloween! Yes, it's that spooky time of year once again, and I hope you guys have enjoyed the horror content on YouTube. So, we've looked at who Laughing Jack is, and we've looked at what Banshees are. So today I thought I'd talk to you about what Wendigos are. Wendigos are a type of cannibalistic creature whose name translates to the evil spirit that devours mankind. There are many depictions of the Wendigo, with one version being reminiscent of a walking corpse with sickly yellow skin covered in patches of fur and stringy hair with long fingers and noticeable bones. It was also known to have bone-like horns or antlers upon its head like that of a deer or stag. A more recognisable version is more of a humanoid form with monstrous traits. It has arms that are too long for its body, long claws and missing lips. It has a mouthful of jagged teeth and fangs, a dog-like tongue with deep sunken eyes. This version is also naked but covered in dead plant material with glowing dead red eyes. This depiction of the Wendigo is certainly one which would be instant death to any unfortunate soul that encounters it. The Wendigo legend goes as far back as the late 1800s from the Native Americans of the Algonquian tribes. It is stated in the Algonquian culture that Wendigos are evil winter spirits or demons, but can also be cursed humans. Cannibalism was in fact a forbidden practice within these tribes, and eating human flesh was considered a dishonourable act, as this was a way of provoking the Wendigo and potentially being possessed by its spirit, or running the risk of mutating into one of these horrific creatures. The punishment for thoughts or acts of cannibalism, as well as selfishness and greed, can result into someone also turning into a Wendigo. In some legends, Wendigos have abilities which allow them to hunt for human flesh. They are alleged to have superhuman strength, stamina to allow them to stalk, overpower, and eventually devour their victims. They are said to move at the speed of the wind and have the ability to walk across deep snow and over open water without sinking. In some legends, they have exceptional eyesight as well as hearing and sense of smell, whereas in other legends, it states that their vision is based on movement, so if you were to stand completely still, the Wendigo might ignore you. Wendigos have been allegedly sighted predominantly in the colder regions of the United States and Canada. Specifically in the forests of Minnesota, the Great Lakes region of Ontario, and other central regions of Canada. There is even a cave system in Ontario, Canada, called Cave of the Wendigo, where there have been, you guessed it, rumoured numerous sightings. I will now read a Wendigo scary story which comes from Reddit user Unanthana, so make sure you turn the lights off, sit back, and try not to get frightened. When I was young, I often spent parts of summers with my grandmother in her home out in the country. It was my favourite place in the world, and I always looked forward to the week-long stays of gardening, baking, late-night fires with s'mores, and ghost stories, and enjoying having my grandmother all to myself. There was a pond not far from her house where I'd sometimes go to swim. It was home to quite a few frogs, and at night they made the most incessant noises. I complained to my grandmother only once, saying I couldn't enjoy the night breeze with all that racket. She took me on her lap and told me a story about an old man and woman who lived near a lake. The old man couldn't stand the singing of the frogs, but his wife told him that they kept the Wendigo away, and to harm them would be unwise. Well, he didn't listen, and set about methodically catching all the frogs on the lake. It was a process that took some time, but he did not stop until he had rid the lake of the pesky amphibians. That night, without the protection of the frogs, he and his wife were slaughtered by the Wendigo, a vicious whip-like demon creature with elongated fingers ending in razor-sharp talons and rows of silver teeth as thin and keen as needles. I wrote it off as another of her ghost stories, though she seemed more serious than usual about it. I never complained about the frogs again, mostly because I grew to enjoy them and put the story out of my mind. In fact, I'd forgotten all about it until it came up this past spring in a Native American literature class I was taking in college. The mention of the Wendigos sparked that old memory of my grandmother's story. I thought she'd made up the word. I didn't realise there were stories about it originating in Algonquian legends. Eager to connect something from my childhood to the topic, I googled it, only to find that my grandmother had apparently been mistaken. There was nothing I could find about the story she had told me, nor any references of frogs providing protection from the Wendigo. In fact, the Wendigo of legends seemed very little like my grandmother's version. They were said to be insatiable, craving human flesh, and sometimes created from the forms of people who had resorted to cannibalism to survive. Descriptions varied, but this sounded almost nothing like my grandmother's bogeyman version. I actually chuckled as I read it, almost a bit embarrassed by how badly my grandmother had messed up the original tale. I changed residences this summer, moving to a newly built 1,000 square foot on each side duplex on the edge of town. The other side is to be occupied by my landlady, who had the place built. However, she isn't scheduled to move the rest of her stuff in and begin living there for a couple of weeks. She's waiting for her lease to end. Even though my new place is only a few minutes from the edge of town, it feels much more isolated. I enjoy the seclusion of my new home and its proximity to a more natural setting. I'm surrounded by woods, and from my patio, I can even see a pond beyond the carefully landscaped lawn, which is meticulously carved out from the surrounding woodlands. Just like the pond near my grandmother's house, the frogs have put up a ferocious racket lately. I prefer not to pay to run my air conditioning if I can help it, so I have every window open to catch a breeze. That means that I can hear them as clearly as if I was standing on the water's edge. It took a few days to get used to the noise, but I'm fine now. Just like how I was those summers when I was young. In fact, the noise has been comforting to me during the stress of the move. Tonight is different. I find myself standing in my living room, staring at where the pond is, though I can't see it in the dark. The air is eerily still and oppressively warm, but all my windows are shut and I feel impossibly cold. I'd long since convinced myself that my grandmother's story had been a silly tale, a twisting of an old legend by irreverent storytellers, but for some reason I have that most overwhelming sense of dread growing in the pit of my stomach. I don't know what to do. I'm trapped. Leaving my house means braving the darkness beyond my home, but I don't know if I'm going to be safe in here either. The frogs have stopped singing. And that was my take on the Wendigo, a cannibalistic, dangerous and powerful creature that lurks in the cold climates of North America. Are Wendigos real? Well, in some cases it's merely a folktale or myth designed to warn people within tribes or those who venture out into the cold woods to not perform acts of cannibalism. However, the alleged numerous encounters during the late 1800s through to the 1920s might suggest otherwise, so I leave it to you, the viewer, to decide. So comment down below what facts you have on Wendigos. Do you have any scary stories or even real encounters to share? And what do you think? Real or myth? Like and subscribe and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!